that we've gotten repeatedly as we've done these presentations. It really boils down to two questions. The first question that we always get is this going to raise my taxes? No, it's not. We're not going to affect the tax rate. We have a $4 tax rate for the school district. That's what we have, like 7 or 8 different rates combined, total $4. We're at a point in time because of some refunding of some bonds, because of a cash balance in some funds and different things. We can accommodate the sale of these bonds under the current $4 tax rate. So it's not going to increase the tax rate whatsoever. If you pay more taxes to the school district in dollars over the next 3 years or 5 years, it's not going to be because the tax rate went up. It'll be because your property values went up or the multiplier was up, something that we really don't control. But the tax rate we control is going to stay right there at $4. The second question that we've been asked repeatedly is, if I support this or if I don't support whatever, how do I know we're not going to be back in the same spot in 5 years? And that's a good question, and that was answered by the Board of Education at the last board meeting. They passed what was called a deficit reduction plan. The deficit reduction plan came from the state board, and it dealt with the balance in our 4 operating funds. For the last 2 years, that's been a negative balance, so when the state board refers to that in that deficit reduction plan, they're talking to the combined balance of those funds over that time period. For us, it really turned out to be a financial management document is what it really turned out to be, because our big issue was with one of those funds, with the Ed Fund. The Ed Fund is the one that has been in the red for many, many years. We have, as a district and a community, we have tried every means that we had at our disposal to subsidize that fund and keep it going, but we never fixed it. We continued to spend more in that fund than we took in on a yearly basis. And this plan addresses that. The plan in general will reduce expenditures by $1 million next year. That brings us back to revenue matching expenditures. Then over the rest of the years of the plan, the 3 years, there are also additional cuts and additional lines set that are being held across the 3 years, so that at the end of the 5 years, not only is the Ed Fund in a positive balance, but the total balance of the 4 operating funds are also in a positive balance. So it's a money management plan more than just a simple deficit reduction plan. Those are the 2 most asked questions, and I think I'm going to stop there because I know you're going to have questions. We had 7 or 8 just to generate discussions about how things work, but unless you want me to go further, I think I'll just stop right there and let these good folks have the chance to ask us whatever they need to ask us. Fair enough?
Great.
Now, surely somebody's got a question. See if you're in my range. We don't.
Someone who knows a lot more about school finance than I do figured out that if the working cash bond doesn't pass, that the tax rate could be reduced about 20 cents. And I want to ask just the board members, if that is the case and it doesn't pass, will you vote to reduce the tax rate? Bud, would you?
Would I reduce the tax rate?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're hard to do there or not. But I'm always going to vote for lower taxes, that's for sure.
Thank you. Mrs. Irwin?
Well, we can't reduce the tax rate. Sorry, we can't reduce the tax rate for the next 5 years until the bonds are paid off. So we're saying.
My supposition is that this working cash bond issue doesn't pass.
Right, and if it doesn't pass, that still doesn't mean immediately we can reduce the tax rate. If it doesn't pass, we still have to keep the current tax rate for the next 5 years to pay off the existing bonds we have. So it can't be reduced immediately by this board.
As I think you understand, we'll be issuing $6.2 million in debt. We'll be paying whatever the going interest rate is on that. And so we'll be reducing that debt plus the interest rate over, is it 4 years or 5 years? 5 years. So anybody that's got a mortgage calculator can plug in the 6.2 million plus assume an interest rate of whatever the last bond was, 3%, 3 or 4%, and that'll give you the net amount that needs to be retired by your tax rate over the next 5 years. And I think that's how that number was backed into, but there were some assumptions that were used. In answer to your question, can you reduce the tax rate if this doesn't pass? My sense is yes. It's a question of timing, but it can happen, I think, sooner rather than later.
This kind of plays into a question that I always get when the follow-up to, is this going to raise your tax rate? And I tell people, no, it will not. And that's a true statement, that it will not raise your tax rate. So the question I always get, okay, is where is the money coming from? Well, I've asked that question to Bud, and Bud knows I've asked him that question. And we're going to divert some tax rate from other funds in order to cover the debt service fund. Is that correct? So, again, I agree with Jeff. You would have to look at the timing, but if we're diverting funds, tax rates from other funds to pay for this, and this does not pass, then I would think it would be possible. Yes.
The short answer is it is possible. The money that, because of the refinancing of the prior bonds, it actually reduced the amount of money out of the bond and interest fund essentially that we would have to pay back for those bonds. So in essence, we gained some ground there, and part of that ground is essentially at the $4 tax rate would be utilized to pay for a $6.2 million issue. So the short answer is yes, it is potentially possible that the tax rate be reduced. Whether it could be reduced immediately or not, I don't know the answer. First question would be is whether or not the existing bonds that we just refinanced could be prepaid or could be paid faster than the 4-year or 5-year time frame that they have. And I don't know the answer to that. So potentially it could be reduced, but it may not be able to be reduced, as Jeff said, year one, but it may be before the 4 or 5 years time frame.
Now, Bud's got it correct.
Okay. You're the expert.
One of the really cool things about my job, is I'm probably in this room one of the people that sits in a position that I don't have the pressures, the restrictions over me about what I say that a lot of people do. When I talked to these guys, the first time I talked about school finance, I told them, I said, if you got steel-toed shoes, you better put them on because I'm probably going to step on some toes when I talk school finance. The question was, could the tax rate be reduced? The simple answer is yes. Now then, if I did that, you would end up hating me. And the reason you end up hating me, because the tax rate from a financial perspective, all those rates, it's a financial tool for us to manage the resources of the district. If I do my job well, then that tax rate's going to be like this. You're not going to see those spikes where your tax rate jumps up like this and you have to pay a whole lot of taxes, and then it goes here and then it jumps up again. The school district is going to borrow money. That's a fact. Because of health, life, safety, we do a 10-year survey, and we have projects that we absolutely have to do, that we should do, that we're supposed to do, and it costs money. It costs anywhere from $30 to $40 million every 10 years. You as a taxpayer have no say-so about that. That's one of those arbitrary things that a district has to do. It's money they have to borrow. The only money we have available out of our regular resources is the local levy for health, life, safety, and it generates about $400,000 a year. Times 10 years, that's $4 million. That's 1/10 of what we need to do those projects. So we have to borrow money. If we do what whoever your expert is says do, we might be able to spin down the balances in IMRF, Social Security, and tort for a year or so, and maybe reduce that rate a nickel here and a nickel there. But that third year, when we have to start in that health, life, safety, we have to borrow $5 million, $6 million, $15 million, and your tax rate's going to go out of sight. And that's not good for you as a taxpayer. It's not good for a certain district. So what we're doing is we're using the tax rate as a tool to manage the resources. All we're doing is we have the rates are set up. We have certain rates that you control as taxpayers. The only way they can be changed is if you vote to change them. We have rates that are arbitrary that we can set without your permission. IMRF, Social Security, and the bond and interest where it relates to health, life, safety. And so we work those rates so that anytime we have to borrow money, and we do have to borrow money, we can adjust the rates so that your overall tax rate stays just like this. So the answer to your question is, yes, we probably could. We could spin down those balances, and we, over a 3 or 4 year period, we could reduce the tax rate by 20 cents, but that fourth year, we've got to jack the rates back up to start building up a balance in those 3 arbitrary funds, and we're going to have to borrow health, life, safety money down the road, and whatever amount it takes to borrow it, we're going to have to jack the tax rate to do it. So that's why we do it the way we do. We try to use those funds as tools to maintain a steady rate for the taxpayer so that you don't suffer those ups and downs that you would because we have to borrow money.
More question? Oh, Jeff.
I have one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
A couple of you on here probably remember me. My name is John Trenier, and I had a couple of questions. Are we over levying in IMRF and all of those funds you were talking about every year? So you have a fund balance there? And what I hear you saying is that over the next 2 or 3 years, you could cut back on that levy, still have the amount of monies in those funds to do what you need to do, but then in a few years you got to bring it back up again? Is that what I heard you saying?
No, the figures that
Give him the
we need are
microphone.
estimates.
Give him the microphone.
Oh, I was going to just keep talking.
Yeah. Mr. Trenier asked good questions, and you probably figure out by now I'm going to answer straight to you whether it makes me look good or bad or you like it or don't. I'm going to tell you this. The answer is yes, but not over levying with the intent simply to build a balance. Those figures are estimates. They're based on payroll. Our payroll goes up and down as we add people and lose people and things change. So we always estimate a little high, and over time those balances build up. That's where those balances come from. We try to maintain those balances for just these type of situations so that when we do have to borrow, we can do it without raising the overall rate.
But the way that our taxes were not going to go up with the working cash bond was that we were going to underestimate our needs in those funds for the next few years, so the tax wouldn't go up.
No, we're going to spin down the balances.
Okay, all right, okay. I have one more question. First of all, I want to commend this board on enacting this deficit reduction plan. I think at the last meeting where I was present, I even talked about if you had something like that in place that I might be supportive of what you want to do. However, I have some concerns about where the cuts are being made. I would like to see cuts made in areas that do not affect the students directly. And so I don't like cutting teachers. God, I hate seeing teachers cut. But I don't mind seeing, but I'm sorry, I don't mind seeing administrators go. And that's you too, Lonnie. You know, what I'm saying is it's where you make the cuts that makes a difference to me. And I'm just curious as to if we're going to reduce that deficit by $1 million over the next year, what is the possibility of setting this referendum or setting this working cash bond aside and see where we are in a year? And if we still need it then maybe we talk about it. After we've, you know, in the newspaper recently I was criticized for talking about having no assurances that the money was going to be handled properly. I don't think that's what I said. I needed assurances that we were actually going to work on a deficit reduction plan. And I'd still like to see that happen. I'm all for that. But I don't want the kids to suffer. So I know Stephanie would agree with it, as all board members would agree with that.
The, you have no assurance that the state is going to come through with the money they promise. Okay? In fact, when the state legislature is in session, no one's safe. So I just appreciate that, and that's the last comment I'm going to make, maybe.
And you are a brave board. But you see, we're not the mean-spirited people that have the reputation of being.
Yeah, we just ask tough questions sometimes. We're pretty nice though. First of all, 3 thank yous. First of all, thank you for all coming out here. I'm glad we had a good turnout for you. The second thank you is all those that worked hard to put it on the ballot. I've done some research, other parts of the state. They just do the working cash referendum over and over and over again. They misuse the tool, as Bud Martin might say. And I'm glad we got on the ballot. So regardless of where it goes, at least we have a voice in it. And it took a lot of work to get those signatures, 3,852 signatures. And we felt every one of them, and out in the cold, and all that work that was done. And I appreciate all that work that you guys did out there. And a lot of people that aren't here tonight, a lot of work was done. And the third thank you, and Bud Martin, although we disagree on a lot of issues, I appreciate all the work that he's done. Probably never get reported. He's done to clean up things. Still ways to go, but he's got some things in the right direction. He's cut in half the negative issues on the audit, and we've had some issues with, like in 2009, there was no bank reconciliation done, and he fixed that. I want to thank us. Here's my question. So 3-parters. There we go. All right. Let's see. In comparing the proposed $6.2 million working cash bond to a $6 million line of credit, which one has, 1, the lowest interest rates, 2, the lowest fees, and 3, the lowest annual cost? It's a 3-part question. Compare and contrast the two. Can somebody help me with that? For the record?
Answer.
This is a trick question.
I thought it was pretty simple. 3-part.
It's a trick question because it's comparing apples to oranges, but I'm going to answer the question anyway. Obviously, common sense. If you're dealing with borrowing $1 million a year and paying the interest and the fees on $1 million a year or $4 million a year, it's going to be less than if you're borrowing $6.2 million for 5 years. So obviously, it's cheaper. Are the fees less for doing the line of credit? Yes, they're less. What was the other one? The annual?
Yeah, the annual cost. Lowest annual cost.
You know, that one I'd have to figure because I don't know that if we're going to pay back $6.1 million over 5 years, that's going to be $1.2 million a year in principal,
Right.
and about $100,000 a year in interest, right? So 1.3 a year would be the cost of borrowing for the $6.2
Well,
million.
the 6.2, I think the first year's interest is about $210,000.
Yeah, but over the 5 years, if we figure $500,000 interest, we're going to pay 1.2 a year on principal and $100,000 a year on interest across the 5 years.
Yeah,
So it's
first year's
1.3.
It drops.
1.3. And for the line of credit, we're paying back, if it's $4 million, we pay back $4 million plus the interest on the $4 million, or if it's $5 million, whatever.
And it's been running
So-
about $30,000 to $33,000 a year. Is that correct?
So the annual cost, the turnaround, the annual cost sounds like it's less on the working cash bonds than it is on the line of credit, but the total amount of interest we pay over the 5 years is greater on the line of credit than it is on the working cash bonds. Does that sound right?
You compare interest.
Right.
There's no question.
Now then, the difference is this. There's no end to the line of credit. If you don't solve the problem goes on. We may pay $30,000 a year forever because there's no end. We're not addressing the problem. We're not accomplishing anything other than we have a $4 million hole in our checkbook. We carry it over year to year to year, and we just borrow and pay the interest on it. So we're not doing anything other than like we have credit cards maxed out, and we're just paying interest, paying the minimum thing. Doing the working cash, we're eliminating that hole. That problem is fixed at the end of the 5 years. That cash.
Assuming you don't
right.
go back to the well.
Well, that's what I'm going to assume, Jeff. That's what the plan is. And also, the deficit in the ed fund is eliminated in year 1 rather than in year 5. So when you do those two things, all of the negative things that we deal with financially go away. The state board does a financial rating each year on the school district, and the things that make us get a negative rating on the financial watch list instead of financial recognition are short-term borrowing, deficit in a fund balance, a shortage of cash balance on hand. Those things go away with that. The negative effects on our bond rating, where we have a BBB, where we could be a higher bond rating, that goes away when we use the working cash as a tool. And what's the other one? I can't think of it. Oh, the debt is gone. We actually pay the debt at the end of 5 years, where with the line of credit, we don't pay the debt. So that's the difference. But the answer to your question is, yes, we'd pay less interest on the line of credit over 5 years than we will for working cash.
And the fees, and the other one, the fees and the rates. What's the difference between the fees and the rates?
Rates would be similar, fees would be greater when you borrow 6.2 million than when you borrow, if you're not gonna borrow the whole 6 million, whatever part of the 6 million you borrow.
I thought the rates were lower on the line of credit, about 2.4 versus 3.4.
It's gonna be between 2 and 3%.
Let me, the question's complex, the answer's really a lot simpler. For the line of credit that we've been taking out the last couple of years, I think we've done 4 million each of the last 2, is that correct? Or we did 8 million, but we only used 4 million last year, and we did 4 million this year. You pay that back when the property taxes come in. So you're only paying interest on that for 2 months, 3 months, whatever. And as a result, the cost is, the interest cost of that is $25,000 to $40,000, depending on what the rate is and so on. The fees are a lot less. The interest cost, as Bud was doing his calculations, if you figure a 3% rate, which I think, our last bond issue was a little bit higher than that, I think.
342, wasn't it?
Something like that. Then you're talking about between 120 and probably 150,000 on average over, well, no, 100 to 120,000 on average interest charges in the debt service fund. So you're saving 25 to 40,000 in your line of credit, but in the ed fund, operating fund, but you're spending 100 to 120,000 in your debt service fund. So as a taxpayer, it's not, I mean, when you think about the rate for $100,000, it's less than a penny on your tax, but it's still, it's not by a long shot an even swap.
Okay, to continue on, no, that's okay. When Jeff was saying is correct, it's cheaper, we pay back that line of credit, the 4 million plus the interest, usually August or so, we approve to do that. But we still owe that $4 million. Thank you, okay, I'll give it back to him. We still owe the $4 million. So we paid the interest, but nothing has been hit on the principal. So we're doing that year after year after year. It's just, we're not whittling away the debt. So although it's costing us more by issuing the bonds, quite a bit more, but in 5 years, we're going to have that 6.2 million paid off, because through the deficit reduction plan, we can get rid of the 2.2 million that we're in debt that's sitting in the ed fund by following our deficit reduction plan, but we still have the $4 million line of credit. And with our cash flow issues and lack of funds, I just can't imagine how we're going to pay back $4 million, and we're just going to keep carrying that over and over. So yes, it does cost more, but we're whittling down the principal by doing it this way.
I forgot to add that everybody has said the deficit reduction plan is something we have to do. And the working cash thing is something that is different. And if we do follow the deficit reduction plan, within 3 years we're going to turn a $2.2 million deficit in our education fund into a $160,000 surplus. And we're going to be turning our total operating cash position from we're in a deficit this year, total operating, is that correct? Into a $1.6 million operating surplus. So you won't have to be you'll be taking down that 4 million. You won't be going back for 4 million each and every year if we follow the plan, but it will require a lot of discipline. And that's the bottom line, and that's something we've all had to have. So
Let me just characterize the word discipline. Understand that in this budget reduction plan, it's not going to be easy. It's going to require cuts. We've cut millions of dollars out of the budget over the last few years, and this budget deficit reduction plan, to Mr. Turnier's comments, it is going to cut to the quick in the district. We are going to have to continue as a part of this budget reduction plan. I mean, this coming year, we've got $1 million to take out of that, to take out of our budget. So again, we're 80-85% people in our district. We don't have much else. So by the time we have staff, teaching staff, support staff, lots of requirements for us to have such staff in the district, that discipline, although required, will be not without some serious reductions in our district as to staffing.
I was just remembering what Jeff said earlier about the difference between the cash bonds and the deficit reduction. And there was a caveat I heard in his voice, though, that even though there is a difference between the cash bonds and the deficit reduction, that it could have an impact on how those funds are used, apparently, once we have them. And maybe we would restore some programs or something out of those cash funds, and then in a couple of years we would find ourselves back in the same situation again because we didn't do the reductions. Now, I don't know, maybe I misread that, and I probably did. I don't remember exactly what you said, Jeff.
Well, I mean, the deficit reduction plan requires discipline. And I think what I said was the working cash bonds will provide some means that we don't currently have in our, if I'm saying this wrong, correct me, but if the working cash bonds pass, that would impact our deficit reduction plan in that we would not have a deficit right away. And what do we then do? I don't know.
And one other comment to that, and I think maybe John Turnier, you asked that at the last forum, is that we kind of have two options. If the bonds pass, we can put the $2.2 million right back into the ed fund and get that ed fund balance back up to zero. Get it ground zero, we get to start over. Or we can take that $2.2 million and put it in the working cash fund, let it sit there with discipline, and implement the deficit reduction plan, which we have to implement by the state of Illinois, and stay to that plan and eliminate the $2.2 million through that means, and at the end of the deficit reduction plan, we would still have the $2.2 million surplus in the working cash fund, which I know to the taxpayers scares you to think we have $2.2 million at our disposal to do with what we want. It's not restricted. So I know that's your worry. I know that's what people are saying. If we give you this money, how do we know you're not going to just blow it, put us back to where, well, again, as Lonnie says, we said at every forum, In order to trust a man, you have to trust a man. Well, in my case, a woman. You know, I'm the finance chair. I take this seriously. It reflects upon me personally. I don't want to waste your money. I want to spend it on kids. I don't want to overly spend to where we get back to where we were before. So for us to sit here and tell you that